Our CBSN political contributor Michael Graham spent some time with the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, in New Hampshire this week. Giuliani was in Portsmouth, where he endorsed a Republican congressional candidate. But when Giuliani spoke to reporters after the campaign event, most of the questions were about the president's morning tweet, which called for an end to the Russia investigation. Michael points to that moment in his news story for CBSNews.com titled, "For GOP Candidates, Trump's Support Can Be a Mixed Blessing." And Michael Graham joins us now. So, Michael, describe that mixed blessing that you watched play out in New Hampshire this week.
Well, the good news for the Republican who's looking for support in the primary that they're having in New Hampshire is that Rudy Giuliani was there, and he's a celebrity, and he's run for president, and of course, he's Donald Trump's personal attorney, and President Trump's approval rating among New Hampshire Republicans is north of 80%. So that's the great news. The bad news is as soon as the speeches ended and the press started asking questions, it was all about President Trump's tweet that Jeff Sessions should fire Robert Mueller and what's going on with that, and the negotiations about the possibility of a sit-down that you were just discussing on CBSN with Zeke a few moments ago. And you could see the crowd deflate and his supporters kind of look around going, this isn't why we brought you here. But unfortunately, wherever Trump goes, these are the stories that follow because of the behavior of President Trump.
So is that the kind of evidence you see that Republicans, like the candidate in New Hampshire, Eddie Edwards, suffer when the president tweets about Russia or the Mueller investigation?
Exactly. It's so off the topic. And because the president keeps it alive every day, then there are other stories that can't break through. I thought it was interesting. Rudy Giuliani kind of gave a good outline for how Republicans could go forward. He talked about the economy, 4.1%. Think about this. The third quarter numbers will come out in October, about a month before the vote, and it's possible that they could start with a 5, according to the latest analysis from the Atlanta Fed. So that's something good. You've got the issue of abolish ICE and the fact that the left is kind of going too far, and that's not a winner for the left, and it gets Republicans energized. So you've got that to talk about. You've got the fact that blue-collar workers kind of like the trade approach that President Trump is taking. Right now, there's some questions about how effective it will be, but all of those are things that Republicans running for Congress could run with. But every time they start to get some momentum, Donald Trump has to tweet about whatever, Russia, North Korea, sneakers, fake news, anything but the stuff they want to talk about.
At the same time, I wonder if some of the president's advisors might say, well, when the president appears before crowds and at those Make America Great Again rallies, this cry of a witch hunt is really a rallying cry for the base.
You know, it is. And with 88% of support in your own party, which is a record for any president other than for a few weeks after the 9/11 attack for George W. Bush, the party's energized. But unfortunately, new polling shows that about 36% of independents support Donald Trump. That's not great. And by a 20-point margin, they say they'd rather see a democratically controlled Congress. And so how do you turn that around? You talk about things that independents care about, like the great jobs numbers. I mean, when you can stand up and say that there are more jobs available than there are people to fill them, when you can say that you've gotten incomes back to where they were in 2008 before the Great Recession, which we finally have, that's great news. I thought it interesting, there was a Wall Street Journal piece that pointed out that, you know, the economy under Obama was a lot softer than people realize. And just as recently as 2013, you had 8% unemployment broadly and almost 14% unemployment among Black Americans. Remind people that you could go back to that. That's a selling point that could attract independents, as opposed to whipping up the base by telling them the things that they already know.
Well, and you've written before, I know, Michael, that the president is hurting Republicans, you've said, by not talking more about the economy. Is it, though, solely the president's responsibility to drive the narrative for midterm candidates?
Oh, no, not at all. But if you want to have a Republican-controlled House, and more importantly, if you want to avoid the pain in the head, neck, and other body parts that a democratically controlled House will be for this president. I mean, think about this. By an overwhelming majority, Democratic voters want President Trump impeached. I saw a number this week that says 61% of Democrats think their party isn't being tough enough. This is the party that's voting no on everything, that's trying to stop a Supreme Court nominee, that's talking about abolishing ICE, and the base says they want even more. If that base elects a House the House is going to spend a lot of time investigating the president. I'm not saying that the investigations wouldn't be legitimate. I'm not saying he doesn't give them lots of opportunities. But if you're Donald Trump, you know that your ability to really maneuver is going to be drastically different with a democratically controlled House that's focused on getting you. And so if you're the president, what can you do to help keep the Democrats from picking up those 23 seats they need? Oh, by the way, there are 23 Republicans representing districts that Hillary Clinton carried in 2016.
All right. I want to switch gears, Michael. There is another midterm fight unfolding between the Republican Party and the Republican mega donor Koch Network after the Koch Network declined to back a Republican Senate candidate in North Dakota. Now, here's what RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel told donors in a letter obtained by Politico Thursday. Quote, some groups who claim to support conservatives forego their commitment when they decide their business interests are more important than those of the country or party. This is unacceptable. Michael, what are the implications of this feud?
Well, the Koch brothers are significant funders, just like Democrats have Tom Steyer, the liberal green activist billionaire. And so, money matters. Republicans are struggling, by the way. I saw another Politico piece that in the swing districts that are likely to determine the outcome for the House, Democrats are actually outraising the Republicans in the open seats where Republicans are retiring. So that's going to be a problem. So they need the money. It bothers me, though. I did talk radio for years. Every time I would get on the air, someone would accuse me of getting money from the Koch brothers. I just want to remind the Koch brothers, you never sent me a penny. My mailing address is in Boston. You can find me, guys. But it always makes us laugh on the right because the Koch brothers are ideological donors. They're kind of libertarian leaning. And so, for example, they support things like tax cuts, but they're also very big on how do you reduce recidivism for people in prison. They want to see people who've spent time in prison find a new set of values and return to the workforce. It's a kind of small government, kind of libertarian view. And President Trump, whether you love him or hate him, he's not a small government libertarian style Republican. He's more of a big government nationalist, America first, restrictions on trade. The Koch brothers would be anti-trade wars, whether it was President Donald Trump or President Bernie Sanders. That's their view. And the frustration is that there are people in politics who just want to win. And then you have these ideological activists, and they're on both sides, like I mentioned Tom Steyer, who have an agenda that they want to promote regardless of who's in office. And the Koch brothers are doing what they've always done. They always put their agenda first.
All right. Well, I'm sure that story is very much to be continued. Michael Graham, thanks so much for joining us. Great to have your insight.
My pleasure.